Seconds ago, James Webb captured something nobody expected to see. Scientists stopped because this wasn't supposed to happen today. Every new image makes the mystery even bigger. What do you think this looks like? Drop one word in the comments, then subscribe. Because what happens next changes everything. Nothing about this discovery feels normal. Stay with me, because the next few minutes will completely change how you see the universe. Inside a quiet control room, nobody celebrated when the newest image appeared. People leaned closer instead. One engineer checked the screen again. Another compared fresh data with older files. Nothing matched. Every number pointed toward a single bright object that shouldn't have existed. At first, everyone believed the telescope had made a mistake. That would have been the easiest answer. It wasn't. James Webb has spotted strange galaxies before. It's uncovered hidden stars, dusty worlds, and light that traveled for billions of years. None of that prepared the team for this moment. Floating across the darkness was a burst unlike anything stored in their records. It wasn't fading. It wasn't moving the way normal objects move. Somehow, it seemed to grow brighter every time new measurements arrived. Imagine shining a flashlight into an empty room and watching the beam become stronger after hitting nothing at all. That's what this looked like. Common sense said it couldn't happen. The numbers kept saying otherwise. Scientists ran every test they could think of. Software errors came first. Hardware problems followed. They checked mirrors, sensors, timing, and transmission logs. Each result came back clean. Whatever James Webb captured wasn't coming from a broken machine. It was coming from space itself. Here's where everything gets stranger. The light wasn't acting alone. Hidden inside the signal were tiny flashes, appearing in a pattern that repeated again and again. Not every second, not every minute. The spacing stayed almost perfect, as though something enormous was sending pulses across the universe with impossible precision. Nobody rushed to announce it. Instead, the room became quieter than before. Every fresh calculation raised another question. Could this be a natural event nobody had ever witnessed? Had two unseen objects collided? Or had Webb stumbled across something completely outside today's understanding? Keep those questions in your mind, because the answer isn't what anyone expected. Hours passed without a clear explanation. Teams from different departments compared notes. Independent computers processed the same information. Every path ended at the same unbelievable conclusion. The signal was real. That's when one researcher noticed a tiny detail almost everyone else missed. Hidden beneath the strongest pulse sat another faint glow, barely visible unless every layer of data was stacked together. Alone, it looked meaningless. Combined, it formed a shape that seemed almost impossible. That discovery changed the entire investigation. Because if the brighter signal was only the surface, what was creating the shadow beneath it? Nobody had an answer, yet everyone in that room knew the search had entered a completely different stage. Screens filled with fresh simulations, while powerful computers rebuilt the event frame by frame. Every attempt ended with the same strange result. The hidden glow wasn't following the bright flash. Somehow, it appeared first. That tiny difference changed everything. Scientists replayed the sequence again, then again. Every pass made the mystery deeper. According to everything they understood, the brighter burst should have come before the weaker one. Instead, the faint signal arrived just moments earlier, almost like a warning that something massive was about to happen. Think about that for a second. Imagine hearing thunder before seeing lightning. It doesn't fit. Your brain instantly knows something feels wrong. That's exactly how this discovery looked to the people studying it. Before we go any farther, hit subscribe if stories like this keep you curious, and drop A in the comments. I'd love to see how many space fans are watching right now. Now here's the part almost nobody expected. One researcher suggested the impossible. What if the bright flash wasn't the beginning of the event? What if it was actually the ending? That single idea forced everyone to stop looking forward and start looking backward through the data. Hours disappeared as older observations were pulled from storage. Thousands of images flashed across giant displays. Most showed nothing unusual. Then one file caught everyone's attention. Hidden inside a section everyone had ignored sat a tiny point of light. It looked harmless. It looked ordinary. Yet its position matched the strange shadow almost perfectly. Coincidence seemed like the safest explanation. Until another match appeared, then another. Soon, several older observations lined up with the same location, each showing a faint signal growing stronger over time. None had been important on their own. Together they formed a pattern stretching across months. That's when excitement turned into concern. If the pattern was real, whatever created it hadn't appeared out of nowhere. It had been building slowly while nobody noticed. James Webb hadn't discovered a single event. It had uncovered the final chapter of something that had already been happening for a very long time. Questions spread faster than answers. Could two invisible giants have been circling each other? Was an unknown object tearing through space, or had something even stranger been hiding behind ordinary starlight all along? Every possibility sounded unbelievable, Then another message arrived from a different research team studying the same region. Their data didn't just support the strange pattern. It revealed one shocking detail that nobody inside the control room had even considered. The mysterious shadow wasn't standing still. It was moving toward something far larger. Silence filled the room as every screen locked onto the same destination. The shadow wasn't drifting through empty space. It was heading straight toward a giant cloud of gas that had remained unchanged for longer than anyone could remember. At least, that's what everyone believed until now. Fresh images arrived one after another. Each frame showed the faint object closing the distance. Nobody could explain how it kept its shape. Normal bursts spread outward as they traveled. This one stayed almost perfectly focused, as though an invisible path was guiding it across the darkness. That shouldn't happen. The team measured speed again, then distance, then brightness. Every result agreed. The object wasn't slowing down. It wasn't breaking apart. Instead, it was gaining energy while crossing millions of miles. One scientist finally said what everyone else was thinking. What if this isn't debris? Nobody answered, because the question sounded impossible. Moments later, another simulation finished running. Instead of showing a random explosion, it displayed something that looked almost deliberate. The energy wasn't spreading in every direction. It appeared to be flowing toward a single point hidden inside the giant cloud. Here's the detail that changes everything. When researchers removed the brightest light from the image, another shape appeared beneath it. It wasn't round like a star. It wasn't stretched like a galaxy. It looked more like a thin ring wrapped around complete darkness, almost as if space itself had folded inward. Nobody had predicted that. Every known explanation suddenly felt weaker. Could gravity alone create something like this? Maybe. Could two massive objects bending light produce a strange illusion? Possibly. Yet every model left pieces unexplained. The brighter pulse still arrived too late. The hidden shadow still moved with impossible precision. The growing energy still refused to fade. That's when excitement turned into disbelief. Older telescope records from different observatories were checked one final time. Tiny hints had been sitting there for years, buried inside ordinary observations nobody thought were connected. Alone, each signal looked like harmless background noise. Together, they traced the exact same path James Webb had just revealed. The mystery hadn't appeared overnight. Humanity had simply never noticed it. Stop and think about that. For years, something extraordinary may have been unfolding across the universe while every telescope looked straight past it. Only after placing hundreds of forgotten pieces together did the full picture begin to emerge. Then the final comparison appeared. A computer overlaid the newest image with the oldest one. Every person watching leaned closer. The glowing ring matched perfectly. Not almost, not nearly. Perfectly. That meant the object hadn't changed shape across all that time. Only one thing had changed. Something enormous inside the dark cloud had finally started responding. Whatever James Webb had uncovered wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Nobody left the control room. Coffee turned cold. Conversations became whispers. Every new image arriving from James Webb seemed to add another piece to a puzzle that refused to make sense. The strange response inside the dark cloud wasn't random anymore. It followed the same rhythm every single time another pulse reached it. Something was answering. That idea sounded unbelievable, so the team searched for a simpler explanation. They checked whether hidden dust could be bending the light. They tested if invisible gas might be reflecting energy back toward the telescope. Each model explained one small piece. None explained everything. Then another pulse arrived. This one looked different. Instead of growing brighter immediately, it paused for a brief moment before exploding into an even stronger flash. The delay lasted less than a second, yet it was enough to make every scientist in the room stare at the screen without saying a word. That tiny pause changed the entire investigation. Imagine knocking on a locked door. Nothing happens at first. Then, after a short silence, someone knocks back from the other side. That's exactly what the data seemed to suggest. Nobody wanted to believe it. Fresh calculations began immediately. Powerful computers rebuilt the sequence using different starting points. Independent teams worked without sharing results, hoping to avoid accidental bias. Hours later, every group reached the same disturbing conclusion. The delay was real. Even stranger, it happened with every pulse. Here's the part that nobody could ignore anymore. The hidden object wasn't simply reacting. Each response carried slightly more energy than the signal that reached it. That meant something inside the cloud was adding power instead of losing it. Nothing in the original models predicted behavior like that. Excitement quickly mixed with concern. If the measurements were correct, this wasn't just another strange object waiting for a scientific paper. It represented a process nobody had ever observed before. Every accepted explanation suddenly looked incomplete. One researcher quietly asked a question nobody expected. What if we've been looking at this backward the whole time? The room fell silent again. Maybe the glowing pulse wasn't causing the reaction. Maybe the reaction was causing the pulse. That single possibility flipped the entire investigation upside down. Instead of searching for the source outside the cloud, every simulation now focused deep inside it. New models appeared across the monitors within minutes. Most failed instantly. One didn't. Its prediction matched the latest observations almost perfectly. Nobody smiled. Because if that simulation was even close to reality, the enormous cloud wasn't hiding a dying object. It was surrounding something that had only recently awakened. Then another alert flashed across the main display. James Webb had captured one more image. This time, the center of this mysterious ring wasn't completely dark anymore. A tiny spark appeared where absolute darkness had existed just moments before. At first, everyone assumed it was another sensor glitch. That explanation lasted less than a minute. Fresh images kept arriving, and everyone showed the same faint point growing brighter. Whatever hid inside the cloud had changed. Nobody could explain why. The control room became strangely quiet again. Engineers watched incoming data while researchers compared every new frame with observations collected over the past several months. The pattern remained perfectly consistent. The glow increased in small steps, never rushing, never stopping. That steady rhythm felt almost intentional. Imagine watching a sleeping city from high above. One light switches on, then another. Soon, the entire skyline begins waking up. That's exactly what the sequence resembled, except this wasn't a city. It was something unimaginably larger. Here's where the mystery reached another level. The newest measurements revealed that the bright point wasn't producing ordinary light. Instead, it emitted several narrow bands, each appearing for only a fraction of a second before fading again. Every band carried a slightly different energy level, creating a pattern unlike anything the team had expected. One scientist noticed something remarkable. The spacing between those bands matched the timing of the earlier pulses almost perfectly. That couldn't be ignored. If both patterns shared the same rhythm, they were almost certainly connected. Suddenly, the investigation wasn't focused on two separate mysteries anymore. It had become one enormous puzzle with pieces finally beginning to fit together. Excitement spread through the room, and concern followed immediately behind it. A fresh simulation suggested the glowing center wasn't becoming brighter because it was creating more energy. Instead, something outside the cloud appeared to be feeding it. Every incoming pulse strengthened the hidden source, making each response slightly more powerful than the last. Nobody liked that possibility, because if the model proved correct, the process wouldn't stop on its own. Researchers searched older sky surveys once again, hoping another telescope had captured similar behavior years earlier. Most records showed nothing unusual. Then, one forgotten archive revealed a faint signal in nearly the same location. At the time, it had been dismissed as background interference. Now it looked anything but ordinary. That single discovery stretched the timeline much farther back than anyone expected. Whatever James Webb had uncovered hadn't started recently. Humanity had simply lacked the tools to recognize it. Stop and think about that. For years, something extraordinary may have been unfolding in plain sight while every observation quietly slipped into forgotten archives. Only now were those scattered clues beginning to tell one story. Then another alert appeared across every monitor. The latest image showed the glowing center doing something nobody had predicted. It wasn't getting brighter anymore. It was opening. Nobody knew what that actually meant until the next stream of images arrived. The dark center didn't burst apart. Nothing exploded. Instead, a narrow line of light slowly spread across the middle, almost like the first crack appearing in frozen ice. Every frame made that opening slightly wider. The room stood completely still. Scientists enlarged the image again and again, searching for anything that could explain what they were seeing. Dust couldn't produce it. Random noise couldn't create such perfect symmetry. Equipment failure hadn't already been ruled out hours earlier. That left only one possibility. Something inside the cloud was changing in real time. Fresh measurements poured into the system. Brightness increased. Temperature estimates shifted upward. The surrounding gas began moving faster than before, creating long streams that curved toward the growing opening. Instead of pushing material away like a normal explosion, everything appeared to be falling inward. That wasn't expected. Imagine watching a river suddenly reverse direction. Every instinct tells you water should keep flowing downhill, yet now it races the opposite way. That's exactly how these readings felt to everyone watching. Here's the detail that made the entire room uneasy. The movement wasn't random. Every stream curved toward the same location with almost perfect precision. It looked less like chaos and more like gravity had suddenly become stronger than anyone predicted. One researcher quietly compared the pattern with older computer models. Most didn't match. One came surprisingly close. It described what could happen if an incredibly massive object suddenly became active after remaining quiet for an extremely long time. Nobody claimed that was the answer. Nobody wanted to jump that far. Still, the similarities were impossible to ignore. Questions filled the room faster than explanations. Was the cloud hiding something ancient? Had a forgotten process finally reached its breaking point? Or was James Webb witnessing a completely new stage of cosmic evolution that nobody had ever imagined? Every option sounded unbelievable. Then another image appeared. This time, faint arcs surrounded the opening, forming delicate circles that expanded outward before disappearing into the darkness. They lasted only seconds, yet every computer recorded them. The circles weren't identical. Each one grew slightly larger than the last. Stop and picture that for a moment. Something hidden billions of miles away wasn't simply changing anymore. It seemed to be building momentum. Every pulse became stronger. Every response lasted longer. Every new observation suggested the event was accelerating instead of slowing down. Then the lead analyst noticed one final detail buried inside the newest data. The expanding circles weren't spreading in every direction. They were all pointing toward the exact same distant region of space. Whatever had awakened wasn't acting alone. Something out there appeared to be answering back. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Every eye stayed fixed on the newest projection as another wave of information reached the control room. The distant region wasn't empty like earlier maps suggested. Hidden beneath layers of faint light sat another object almost impossible to detect. It had escaped notice because it blended perfectly with the darkness around it. Now it couldn't stay hidden anymore. The fresh signal grew stronger with every passing moment. More surprising still, it followed the exact same rhythm as the mysterious opening inside the cloud. One pulse appeared here, another appeared there. The gap between them never changed. That wasn't coincidence. Researchers measured the distance separating both locations. The answer left everyone speechless. Even traveling at the speed of light, no normal exchange could happen that quickly. Whatever linked them seemed to ignore the limits every student learns in school. Think about that for a second. Two places separated by an unimaginable distance appeared to react almost together. If the timing proved real, every familiar explanation suddenly became much harder to defend. Here's where the mystery reached its highest point. The team overlaid every observation collected during the investigation. The bright burst, the hidden shadow, the growing ring, the opening center, the distant response. Alone, each discovery looked strange. Together they formed one continuous chain stretching across a vast section of space. Nothing looked random anymore. One scientist quietly suggested the connection might be part of an enormous natural process that humanity had simply never witnessed before. Another believed something far older had finally reached a turning point after remaining silent for ages. Neither idea explained every detail. Both raised even bigger questions. Then another image arrived. This one lasted only a fraction of a second before disappearing from the display. Most people barely noticed it. One analyst did. After enlarging the frame thousands of times, a faint pattern appeared inside the expanding light. It wasn't perfectly round. It wasn't perfectly smooth. Instead, tiny ripples spread across its surface like waves moving through a still lake after a single stone breaks the water. Nobody expected that. Every computer model predicted clean edges. Reality refused to cooperate. Stop and picture the moment inside that room. Months of careful work had led to one unbelievable discovery after another. Yet the universe kept revealing something even stranger every time another answer appeared. Then the final comparison finished processing. Every ripple pointed toward the same distant object revealed only minutes earlier. The connection wasn't fading, it was growing stronger. If the calculations were even close to correct, James Webb hadn't captured one impossible event. It had witnessed the first visible moments of something much larger unfolding across the universe. Only one question remained. What would happen when both signals finally met? Nobody wanted to guess anymore. Every prediction made earlier had been overturned by another discovery. The control room no longer felt like a place filled with answers. It felt like the front row of something history would never forget. Fresh data arrived. The distance between both signals kept shrinking. Every calculation confirmed the same outcome. Whatever connected them was approaching a single moment that couldn't be delayed. Nobody knew whether the meeting would last a second or an hour. Nobody knew whether the event would end quietly or transform into something even greater. Then it happened. The two signals touched. Every monitor inside the room flashed at once before settling into complete silence. The bright ring disappeared. The hidden shadow vanished. Even the strange pulses stopped. For one breathtaking moment, the entire region looked completely empty. Several people thought it was over. It wasn't. A single point of light suddenly appeared where both signals had met. It wasn't the brightest object James Webb had ever recorded. It wasn't the largest either. Yet every instrument agreed on one extraordinary detail. The light remained perfectly steady. No flickering, no fading, no movement, just one silent glow hanging inside the darkness. Here's the part nobody expected. Instead of producing new pulses, the mysterious light began bending the space around it. Nearby stars appeared slightly stretched. Faint galaxies behind it shifted into delicate arcs. Everything surrounding the object looked subtly distorted, as though the universe itself had become soft around that single location. Nobody celebrated. Nobody spoke. Because every person watching understood the same thing. Whatever James Webb had witnessed wasn't behaving like anything they had prepared for. Could it have been an entirely new cosmic process? Was it an ancient event reaching its final stage after millions of years? Or had humanity simply caught an ordinary part of the universe that no telescope had ever been powerful enough to notice before? Nobody could honestly answer. And maybe that's the most exciting part. Every great discovery begins with confusion instead of certainty. The biggest breakthroughs rarely arrive carrying clear explanations. They arrive carrying better questions. Stop and think about that. Tonight, somewhere beyond everything familiar, another mystery may already be unfolding while humanity waits for the next image, the next signal, or the next clue hidden inside the darkness. James Webb didn't give the world a perfect answer. It gave everyone a reason to keep looking. Perhaps the real discovery wasn't the strange light itself. Perhaps it was the reminder that the universe is still filled with secrets waiting for someone curious enough to find them. The next transmission could change everything again, and when that moment finally comes, you'll already know why the entire world is watching the darkness a little more carefully than before. Maybe the next image will answer everything. Maybe it'll create even bigger questions. That's why discoveries like this keep the world looking up. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe now because the universe